Welcome to the Lisbon Sessions with David Russell of New Frontiers, exploring the Portugal Golden Visa journey with leading experts across the industry. In this episode, David meets with Gustavo Machado of CRS Lawyers. Gustavo outlines and explains the client process for the Golden Visa and exactly what steps applicants require to follow.
So everybody, just continuing my Lisbon Sessions, as I'm calling it, David Russell from the New Frontiers Energy Fund. I'm sitting here in the beautiful offices of CRS Advogados with Gustavo Machado of CRS Advogados, one of the leading law firms helping people get through their Golden Visa process, achieve their Golden Visa. Gustavo, thanks so much for joining me. Thank you for your welcome, and I'm loving specifically these beautiful branded espresso cups.
I'm glad you love it. I hope the coffee is as good as the brand.
The coffee is delicious, and I needed it. I was trekking. I just trekked across 40 minutes across in a slightly hairy taxi ride.
Okay.
Lisbon special.
Yes, always an adventure.
So tell me, the main thing I want to achieve, Gustavo, I think with all these people out there on the online looking and researching Golden Visa, okay, people apply for all different reasons.
Yes.
But they walk into CRS and they say, I want the Golden Visa. What do they need to do? Take us through that actual process.
Sure. So first of all, thank you so much. It's my pleasure
You're
to
welcome.
be here and to welcome you again in our office.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure to see you and in good shape, which is also good as well. So in terms of how the process works and how we can guide a client from day one to the day they no longer need our help, which of course we hope it's a long way down the road. So that's our first concern, that's our first focus. We know that this is a long process, and therefore we need to be able to create a long-term relation with the clients that are going to start working with us. So we know that from the moment zero, let's call it like that, until the moment that they reach their ultimate goal, being that just using the Golden Visa as long as they need, or what happens with most of the clients, to be able to obtain a Portuguese passport and citizenship, which is one of the beauties, one of the advantages that the Golden Visa gives, and one of the reasons why it's probably one of the strongest, if not the strongest, Golden Visa program in all Europe. So a client arrives to CRS law firm, or we do an online meeting, because nowadays,
everybody's global.
Everybody's global, exactly. And honestly, and this is also a good point to start, all the process can be done remotely.
So clients don't have to visit. They're missing out because it's a beautiful city, but they don't have to come to Lisbon or Portugal.
Exactly. So that's something we always like to tell the clients on our first meeting. Thankfully, this is probably one of the few things that the pandemic brought that it's good, is that everything can be done remotely, from the initial preparation of the process and the initial formalities, like getting the tax number and opening a bank account, from the preparation of all the required documents for them to be able to do the investment, regardless of the investment that you choose, and of course, the ultimate step of submitting the actual application. So if a client wants to apply for the Golden Visa, they don't need to come to Portugal for that. We, of course, are welcoming them to come. Like you said, it's always a good trip for multiple reasons, not just to come to our office and to meet us. That's probably the most boring part of their trip. But if they are not, for some reason, work reason,
or combine it with a little holiday, something casual.
Exactly. If they want, they can. If they are not available to do so for any reasons that they deem fit, they don't need to come. And so they do usually an initial meeting. Sometimes it's only one, but if they need another meeting, another clarification session, whatever they require, we are always available. And once the client says, okay, Gustavo, I'm ready to move forward with my Golden Visa, we immediately start working on everything they need. The first things we always start working are the NIF number, the Portuguese tax number, and opening up a Portuguese bank account, because it's always recommended. The NIF, it's mandatory. The bank account, it's always recommended to have it, regardless of the investment option that they choose.
Understood.
Regardless of being fund A or B, or even if they go to one of the other routes of investment, which are not as common, but still there are some people that do it. Once while we are arranging for everything for the NIF and the bank account, we also advise the client to start exploring the market to see what's the best option of investment. Usually a client, depending on the budget, will decide exactly which route to take, because as you know, the funds route, it's
course.
500,000 euros.
Yep.
But there are some clients that they are not capable of doing that, so probably they will look at the donations route. Nevertheless, I can tell you from experience, and especially looking since the last law change in October 2023, that the funds became the number one option of investment. So I would say 80% of the clients will go for the funds and only 20 will go to the other options. So while the client is choosing the fund, we continue the process of getting the NIF and the bank account. Depending on the nationality, this can be a quite fast process. Or
and what's fast, Gustavo, just to give people an idea?
Sure. So the NIF, we are always dependent on the tax authorities, but the truth is that we've already seen NIFs being obtained in 48 hours, for example, which is quite fast. Depending also on the season. I'm going to give you an example. During Christmas holidays, of course, the NIFs were not taking 48 hours, they were taking 1-2 weeks to be ready. As for the bank, depends a lot on the bank as well, although the banks we normally work with, they are well prepared, experienced, and they are also used to provide a fast service to the client to be able to open the account remotely. But it will depend a lot on the nationality. Why? Because there are certain nationalities that don't go to compliance. So the bank receives the documents and normally they can have the account open in a matter of days. I would say 1 week tops.
Okay.
But if it's what they call a potentially risk nationality, these processes can take longer because they will go to compliance, and unfortunately compliance of the banks, I always joke about it, I think they are even worse than let's call ourselves the normal lawyers, and the compliance lawyers of the bank, I think they are even more picky and bureaucratic than us. But well, in the end, it's always a matter of time, unless of course the client has a considerable problem or cannot be able to provide certain documents. We don't see a situation where a client doesn't get an account open. But of course, the main nationalities, probably the nationalities that are investing more in Portugal, example, and the number one is definitely US clients.
I would
These
agree
clients
with that.
don't go to the compliance part. So to get the tax number and to open a bank account for them, I would say it's perfectly manageable, unless it's in normal circumstances, unless it's a more complicated time of the year. I would say it's something that can be easily done in 1, maximum 2 weeks. So,
that's good to know.
Which is a really good timing, especially for these clients that are more and more interested in Portugal. So while we are taking care of these steps, regardless of already having them ready or not, client makes the decision about the funds. We always like to point out that we as lawyers don't actually work as fund advisors. Nevertheless, we of course have done a lot of homework. We know the funds in the market.
You have to be comfortable with the offer.
So what happens is either the client comes through some, as you know, there are a lot, some immigration agents, someone that makes the bridge both with the lawyers and futurely with the fund or the investment as well. Or if the client comes also directly and says, look, I'm looking at this and this fund, our job is to tell the client, look, this fund for the golden visa, it's definitely eligible. So we do our due diligence. If we already know the fund, of course, we will not redo it. We will for sure verify if nothing has changed, but it's not as a detailed due diligence as if it was a new fund. If it's a fund that we don't know of, we do the due diligence from scratch and we confirm to them. Besides this, let's call it insurance of confirming the eligibility of the fund, the only thing we can also explain to the client is if we know the track record of the fund, if we have clients there, what was the experience both us and the clients had with that particular option of investment. From a financial point of view, we always advise the clients to check directly with the fund, which we are also happy to make that connection if they haven't been able to do so. And if the clients also want, we already saw this happening, clients hired actual financial advisors from their home country, from here, to advise on the performance of the actual fund and portfolios of the fund. So let's say NIF it's done, bank it's done, fund is chosen, or one of the other options. I'll use the example of the fund because it involves a bit more steps, but it's also the more common. So let's say clients chooses the fund, and as you know more than everyone, better than everyone, clients will need to go through what we call the KYC and subscription
And that is
process.
of each individual fund. If a
Exactly.
client chooses 2 or 3 funds, they have to satisfy the KYC of
Exactly.
each individual
Exactly.
fund.
As you so well said, this is a really important note. The investment in the funds, the minimum is 500,000, but doesn't have to be in only one fund.
No, and we
Client
understand
must,
that as well, Gustavo. People should have a portfolio, 2 or 3 funds.
If you diversify the investment,
we understand.
if you don't put, as we say here, all eggs in the same basket,
Of course.
if one fund it's not performing as you expected, but the other is performing better, this will allow you to balance your portfolio and your investment. But every fund have their own KYC and subscription rules and steps, but in general, what they ask is certain documents,
similar to the banks, pretty
really
much?
Similar to the ones that they need to provide to the bank, which is good because then those documents can be properly certified and attested by the lawyers here, and then the same way we provided the bank the documents to allow the account to be open, we can provide the documents to the fund for the clients to pass the KYC. There will be also a few forms specific from each fund, but that's something also the client can fill and send directly to the fund. So as you can see, is a really remote process, an online, almost online process that we have.
So if somebody's, sorry to interrupt, Gustavo, I'm just thinking, if somebody's watching this now, sitting in California, New York, London, thinking, I want to do this, what is the ballpark between starting the process, calling you guys up, and then they're fully invested, and the clock is ticking on their golden visa? 2 months?
Yeah, I would say 2 months is a good.
So an 8-week process from start to finish.
That's a good estimation. Again, each case can be different for several reasons, but that's definitely a good estimation. I can tell you we even have situations, especially when the law was about to change and everything, we managed to do it in 1 month. But I believe it's the fair, because we need to manage clients' expectations and everyone's expectation on this. So I definitely agree that 2 months is a good estimation of time.
What Gustavo's referencing when the law changed, everybody, is I will try not to butcher it, Gustavo, the Machado bill?
Yes.
The more housing bill.
Mais habitação, exactly.
Mais habitação. And that was where real estate was withdrawn as a qualifying asset class for the golden visa. So none of the investment funds that you invest into can have real estate exposure. New Frontiers has no real estate exposure. Some people say, well, why does a solar fund, why does it not have real estate exposure? Because we only buy the shares of projects, and the projects are all leasehold projects. So there's no real estate ownership in New Frontiers, and it actually we qualified under the old rules, qualify under the new rules. But it's just a point, because Gustavo has mentioned it correctly, this change in the law. You have to ensure as you build your portfolio that none of the investment funds that you're choosing have real estate exposure, or they will unfortunately fall by the wayside, and you'd have to start the whole process again.
Yes, absolutely correct. That was the last, and let's hope for some time will be
absolutely
will be, at least let's call it. I don't like to call it a negative change, okay? Because I understand, although I'm of the opinion, as so many people, that the golden visa, it's not the main responsible at all for the housing issues in Portugal, but something had to be done.
It was sensitive.
Also to create a different image of the program that was not being the best one, both here and internationally. But yeah, nowadays, as you so well said, real estate is no longer an option, so that's why people turn into funds or one of the others, but once again, funds are the main options. Going back to the process itself, client as the NIF, as the bank account, as decided on the fund, has provided all the documents and passed the KYC and subscription steps of the fund. So there are only two last things the client need to focus on. One, they are both essential for us to then be able to actually submit the golden visa application of the client. One, to complete the investment. Why? Because you cannot submit the golden visa process without the investment having been done. So what does the client need to do? The client will transfer the necessary funds from abroad. When I mean by abroad, doesn't have to be the home country or the country of residence, can be anywhere abroad. Some clients have accounts in other countries rather than those, so they can use it as long as they don't transfer from Portugal to Portugal.
Understood.
Okay, they transfer the funds to their Portuguese bank account, and from their Portuguese bank account, the funds will be transferred to the fund or funds to the investment that they chose. And through this payment, through this investment, we will then be able to receive from the, let's say it's the fund, we'll be able to receive from the fund the declarations that we need for the Golden Visa, which will be a declaration attesting that the fund is eligible and that complies with all the requirements related to the Golden Visa application, plus what we call the bank declarations, which are the declarations that the bank in Portugal, the bank where the client has the account, will attest, one, that the client made an international transfer of the minimum amount for those investments, two, that the money was used, literally that the money was used in case of the funds to buy a certain number of participation units in the amount of X that in total will fall down under the 500,000 minimum. That. Exactly. So with this, we have everything we need from the investment side to be able to submit the Golden Visa application. The only thing remaining, and this is something we immediately advise the client to do simultaneously so we don't lose time, is the preparation of the personal documentation. Okay, so each client, depending on the nationality, depending as well if they imagine they are nationals from their nationalities from one country, but then they live in another, and also as important or even more important, the family composition. Okay, depending on the number of applicants and the actual family composition and the family relations, each client will need to provide certain documents for him or her and the family. Okay, these are general documents that again will depend on the actual applicants, but we are talking about what? We are talking about criminal records or police clearance, or in US case, FBI background check. We are talking about, if there's a spouse in this application, the marriage certificate as well. If there are children, depending on the age, can be birth certificate. It's always required.
So it's nothing too tenuous, nothing too difficult to produce.
The truth is, and talking in our case, but I believe this is the case with everyone that has already enough experience and knowledge about this program, and having worked with so many nationalities as we did, because currently I think we have more than 50 nationalities submitted as Golden Visa applicants. Of course, some more than others.
There's a higher proportion,
yes, of course.
But that's incredible, 50, goodness.
But this allows us to, when a client comes, regardless of the nationality, I would say, when they need to apply for these documents, we can already tell them, okay, look, you need to get these documents. The way to get these documents, you can, for example, work or contact this person or this company in your country. And then these documents, of course, to be accepted in Portugal, they need to be, let's call it, legalized. Okay? This can be done by one of two ways. If the country that issues the documents belongs to the Den Haag Convention, as Portugal does, the way to do it is by means of the apostille, which is basically the stamp.
The apostille stamp.
Exactly, on it. If the country doesn't belong, so most countries do, but I can immediately remember, although they will start belonging, but UAE, they will not start belonging. UAE is the best example of a country that doesn't belong to the Den Haag, neither there are plans that they will belong soon. And in those cases that the country doesn't belong to such convention, they need to get the documents to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the country, plus the Portuguese consulate or embassy. So
little bit more work to do,
but still
not too
regardless of what they need to do with these documents, we provide the clients with the list of documents almost from day one. We don't do it from day one because the documents also have a certain validity, so we always try to make sure that nothing will expire
in that time zone.
Exactly, but we provide the list and we provide instructions on how to get them. This will allow the clients to have less trouble and lose less time on the obtaining of the documents.
So it's a very sound, holistic service you bring, Gustavo, with a lot of hand-holding. So I think I'm giving a lot of comfort, as I'm speaking to Gustavo, is that you're not getting thrown away to the wolves. If you're taking on a proper law firm like CRS, you will be walked through the process and helped. You're not on it sort of out there in the wilderness on your own. So
I think that's essential.
To everybody, yes, of course.
Once these documents are ready, client sends the documents to us.
Yeah.
Everything by email. We don't need original documents for the initial submission. So once again, remote.
That's good.
And we gather the investment documents we mentioned, the personal documents we've mentioned, and we officially submit the Golden Visa application of the client and the family member. The client, in order to complete this submission, will have to pay the analysis submission fee to the immigration office. Currently, for reference, it's €605.10 per applicant. And from that moment, the client is officially under the Golden Visa program. Two important notes about this. And why is this such an important milestone? First one, and it's logical, the client is already under the process, meaning that a lot of clients ask this, and were asking even more when Portugal was considering so many changes and then actually changed the program.
Understood.
It's really important to clarify that if an investor, a Golden Visa client comes, does everything, submits the Golden Visa tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, the program changes and the investment that he did, it's no longer eligible. Or even if the program is over, they cannot be affected by this. They are already under the program. The law is not retroactively. So that can't
be retrospectively taken away from them.
No, because the law, constitutionally, the law in Portugal cannot be retroactively, especially in a negative way, as this would be. And so they conserve the rights that they gained according to the law that was at the moment where they submitted.
So if you're in, you're in.
Exactly.
It's just a matter of time.
With this,
to get
I'm not saying we expect changes soon, and we don't, but we never know. Governments are not the most.
No, absolutely. And it is a politically sensitive sort of area, so depending on.
I think what's good is that, one, the current government in force, it's the government that it's a right, let's call it central right party that was responsible for the creation of the program. So they are not against it.
No.
And at the same time, we also have seen that the annual budget for this year was already approved. So at least, I would say worst case scenario, at least until till the beginning of next year, there's no changes to be expected in the legal framework of the program. Another thing, and this is something we can now say, although I don't like to say this like with a 100% guaranteed, I think now, if before we were like at the 50%, perhaps now we are at the 80%. Why? And what am I mentioning? So, as you know, and as everybody probably heard, and this goes back already for more than 1 year, there was a new citizenship law in Portugal. And this new citizenship law literally writes that the moment the 5-year clock for be able to apply for the Portuguese citizenship under the Golden Visa starts counting. And what it's written there, it's moment of submission. There were a lot of questions about what this would mean, moment of submission. Why? Because although they published the law, they still haven't published the regulations, which is absurd. Just between us, it makes absolutely no sense. But the truth is that technically and legally, a law without a regulation could not be enforced. Nevertheless, on the past 8th of, now I'm confused if it was 8 or 9 of January, some lawyers, including ourselves, were asked and were invited by IMA to go to a clarification session in person here in Lisbon in their offices, just lawyers. So we were around 40 lawyers, maximum 50 from several law firms. And the purpose of this session was to clarify all these new procedures that are coming. And on that session, besides a lot of information that they granted that are relevant for some cases that are ongoing, that never got pre-approval and never got biometric appointment, because they will need to re-upload new updated documents and everything, although this doesn't reset their process. This is important. It's just a way to be able to complete the applications even before the biometrics. So they will need to provide the same documents they would have to at the biometrics, but now before that. And then this will allow IMA, according to them, to work faster and to be able to provide more appointments and in a faster way. Let's definitely hope that's the case. And they also said, and the reason why I'm saying this is, I don't consider this to be 100%. It's because one, it's a verbal confirmation, and two, it was IMA who said it, and IMA, it's not the entity responsible for the citizenship applications,
Okay.
but they said with every word that the moment of submission to be considered for the 5-year clock to start ticking, it's the moment we submit the online application and we pay the analysis and submission fee, which is great because for all clients ongoing,
Gets it started a lot
means
quicker.
that they are not losing all this time that they are waiting. And for new clients is also motivation in order to be able to invest without thinking, okay, I'm going to do this program, but I'm hearing that it's taking 2 years for me to get the first car. Okay, but if those 2 years are already counting for the citizenship, ultimately this can be even good for you because it means in the future you might pay less fees and the process might take less steps.
That's very valuable.
Again, it's not, I don't feel yet comfortable about saying this 100%, but I can also tell you that this was always our interpretation of our firm of CRS, and it's also the interpretation of, I would say, most players in the market and most law firms, because it's the only interpretation that also makes sense. Why? Because if this measure was done for something, was to compensate and to try to solve everything that happened so far. And this is the only way to actually do that. So signs are very good. I hope now that the annual budget has been approved, now that they are not focusing as much on this and they can probably focus on any pending regulation and mechanism and publication that they need to do, they will be able to, in the next months, confirm this by means of the regulation as well. But at the same time, the truth is that if IMA can provide the official document of the counting of the time saying that you have been legally holding the golden visa for 5 years or more, there's no ground for then IRN and the Civil Registry of Portugal, who are responsible for the citizenship applications, to actually reject. So ultimately, I believe the interpretation is correct and that these are really, really good news. If this, together with these new procedures, and these new procedures also result in the process working faster, I expect this year and the next ones, as long as this continues, and I believe it will, to be really good years. But this year already, I'm feeling that this year will be one great year for golden visa investors overall.
That's very good news. Guys, if you've been listening, guys and girls, if you've been listening to us, David Russell from New Frontiers Fund, we're one of the leading private equity funds that qualify people for golden visa. We generated 10% growth last year, so I would ask you to consider, as part of your golden visa journey, consider us for a part of your portfolio. We've been talking to Gustavo Diaz from CRS Lawyers, one of the leading law firms helping you with your golden visa journey. Sounds like good news. Within 8 weeks from now, you can be on the track to your golden visa journey. 5 years after that, you can have Portuguese citizenship for yourself and other valuable family members. Gustavo, thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure,
I will hopefully see you soon. We'll do another update.
For sure,
and thanks everybody for watching.
Our
Cheers.
pleasure. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone. Thanks a lot.